I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for my opinions in this video, but screw it. Let's do it anyway. Yes, I am going to rank every RMC in this video. I also know that I have not ridden any of these rides, so putting them together was kind of fun and more or less just random. None of what I'm about to say is guaranteed, and this whole list could be completely changed by the end of the year after riding 4 of these rides this summer. Also, just because a ride is near the bottom of this list does not mean that it is terrible. In fact, I think all of these rides are great. With those disclaimers out of the way, let's get into the ranking. In last place is Fire in the Hole at Silver Dollar City. Yeah, it was kind of an obvious pick for this spot. I would have given this ride an honorable mention, but it was done by RMC, so it didn't feel right giving it an honorable mention. With that said, it's still a great looking family ride with so much going on in its duration. There's so many cool sets that just bring you into the world of this ride setting. The fact that this is the most themed RMC really gives it a different character than all of the other rides on this list. I can't wait to get to Silver Dollar City and experience this ride. Taking the 25th spot is Jersey Devil at Six Flags Great Adventure. I feel that this ride is also kind of an obvious pick. The first half, however, looks to provide amazing airtime and laterals as you pop into elements like the turnaround and the zero-G stall, with the airtime coming strongly from the camelback and even the dive loop. Though this ride looks to have an amazing first half, I can't help but feel that the second half is a little lacking. This looks to be the case mainly from the mid-course trims hitting a little bit. That overbank directly after the mid-course still looks to be decently intense, but the following airtime hills look to give weaker ejector airtime. It's still ejector, but compared to the airtime moments in the first half, it does seem a little weaker. In 24th place is Wonder Woman Flight of Courage at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Take what I said about the last one and apply it here. The only difference I see with this ride is that it has an overbank turn to finish, which actually adds something to the experience. Other than that, there's nothing new for me to say. Moving on. At the number 23 spot is New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. I feel that this ride has a similar issue with the last two mentioned in that its airtime moments aren't as strong as other airtime moments by RMC. This ride also looks to lose a little steam in the second half. With this, you may wonder why I have it above the larger Raptors. That is because this is a very long ride that is still full of airtime, even if it isn't as strong as other RMCs. I'm not seeing too many laterals or positives, but they do still seem to be on this ride. This is just a toned down RMC. Taking 22nd place is Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. This seems to have pretty similar forces to New Texas Giant, but there is one key difference. This ride has inversions. With a slower sense of speed, going through these inversions can cause hang time to occur, something New Texas Giant doesn't do. The airtime pops on this ride also appear to be slightly stronger, possibly giving strong ejector with a full train, but that's the problem. This ride feels like it needs a full train to be running with the same steam other RMCs have. That's why I feel I have to knock it down a few spots. In the 21st spot is Stunt Pilot at Silverwood. We're back again with the Raptors. This time, it's about the smaller ones. There's one reason I have these above the larger ones. Power. These Raptors may be shorter rides in duration as well as height, but they hold so much power against the larger Raptors. This one also has a lot of power, but it does look to be a bit more toned down than the other two. That does not mean that there is none, because it looks to just whip through elements such as the dive loop and corkscrew. With a longer train, you might also get more whip in the back row than if this had trains of the same length as the other small-scale Raptors. In 20th place is Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. This ride takes the power of Stunt Pilot and turns it up to 11. Being the first installation of an RMC Raptor, you can definitely tell it was their first attempt at this model. But that's not necessarily a bad thing when the airtime and whip are off the walls. There's so much raw power going through elements such as the dive loop and S-turn. The only real downside with this ride is that it seems to be running horribly rough lately. Other than that, I've got no real complaints here. Taking the 19th spot is Railblazer at California's Great America. Just take everything I said about the previous two entries and apply it here. Though it does look to run a little faster than Wonder Woman at Fiesta Texas, and seems to run a lot smoother too. That's all I have to say up for this one. In 18th place is Goliath at Six Flags Great America. This may also be a short ride in duration, but its size and elements bring it up on the list. That first drop in Camelback looked to bring some of the strongest airtime you could find on a wooden coaster. As well as bringing in possibly underrated airtime, this ride also brings in two excellent inversions, with the stall likely going to be the highlight of the ride for me. Aside from these four excellent moments, it's hard for me to overlook those overbanks. I'm not sure, but they don't look too forceful, and because of that, they might come off as filler track for me. With that, it's not the end of the world because the other elements look to more than make up for it. I can't wait to visit this park and make it my 50th credit. At the 17th spot is Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia. This ride is short in length and duration, but it gives its all for every element. They all fit so seamlessly into the experience and provide all kinds of forces. The signature wave turn looks to give a good dose of laterals as you snap into it. You'd think this ride may not have the strongest overall forces given its height, but you'd be mistaken. There seems to be a decent amount of positive G's going through the overbanks, and then there's the airtime. I'm shocked that the airtime looks that good, but I guess that's what happens when the airtime hills are at a smaller scale. To finish the experience, this ride looks to throw even more laterals at the end as it throws you into a switchback-like maneuver. Taking 16th place is Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. What a terrain coaster this seems to be. This layout doesn't look too crazy, but it still looks to provide some ejector airtime. At the very least, the airtime looks to be strong floater, which is still amazing airtime. Besides, there's always something else being thrown at you when you're experiencing airtime most of the time. There's only a couple moments of straight airtime on this ride, and they look to be the strongest airtime moments. Usually, you're also twisting or getting quick doses of laterals while out of your seat, like on the S-Hill or the first inversion. Speaking of inversions, that first inversion looks so crazy as it looks like it'd be a regular 0G roll, but then it decides to twist the other way. And then there's the final two inversions. The sensation of constantly twisting as you're losing speed just looks so crazy as it looks to provide a great combination of laterals and hang time. In the 15th spot is Medusa Steel Coaster at Six Flags Mexico. I know some people might have this lower for lacking a focus on airtime, but I am not one of those people. Sure, I'd have it a little higher if it was more airtime focused, but not to the point where it'd be an upper tier RMC. I think the main focus of this ride design was the high bank turns, and I think they succeeded with that. Besides, there are a few quick airtime pops to balance out all the positives going through those turns. Also, with a nice mix of inversions, it's really only half of this ride focused on turns. The turns themselves do look forceful, but they do need something else to complement them. Thankfully, there are enough inversions and airtime moments to do that. The turnaround section after the first drop contains what looks to be a strong pop of airtime going into it and a strong pop out. And then there's a full camelback right before the overbank into the final inversion. I think people really underestimate the airtime on this ride. My praise for some coasters without too much airtime may shock you. At 14th place is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom. This is realistically where I'd put Medusa if it was more airtime focused. Really, there's not much of a difference outside of that. They both have a fantastic way of starting off the ride. That inversion serving as the first drop looks to provide a sure unique sensation as hang time turns into whip, especially in the back row. From this point on, both rides are wildly different. Storm Chaser starts off with a camelback that looks to pull crazy negative Gs. The first overbank looks incredibly snappy as one moment you're on level track and the next your body is pointed to the ground. The following turnaround actually looks similar to Medusa's first turnaround, but this one gets lower when actually turning, so it looks to feel more forceful. The rest of the ride looks to give supplements of what you just felt, but a little differently. That 0G roll looks really floaty, and the following trick track double up looks insane as it banks violently during and between strong airtime pops. This ride takes a lot of the normal airtime you would get and finds some way to twist it. Taking the 13th spot is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. What a unique ride this is. This is the first and only ride by RMC that duels, and it looks like they nailed it as far as the elements go. Getting amazing airtime while a train is stalled out upside down on top of you can really only be experienced on this ride. And then the ride immediately hits you with another dueling element just like the Top Gun stall, but with the other track and it being a 0G roll. No element on this ride looks like they don't hit. Even weaker elements like maybe the wave turns look to still add to the experience. The problem lies with this ride hardly ever being able to do what its selling point is. You'd be considered lucky if you got a duel, but if you can look past that, this ride still looks amazing. In 12th place is Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. What more can be said about this ride? This ride has an amazing first drop that looks to fully whip you to the side while getting thrown out of your seat. Later in the ride, the first drop gets complemented by a straight ejector pop off the quarry wall. The rest of this ride almost reminds me of Medusa with a good amount of high bank turns that may give sideways airtime. I'm especially looking at the first turns on top of the quarry wall. You look to go into them with so much speed that they would still be fun if they didn't give airtime. After that, you go into a really well-placed inversion onto the quarry wall, which for RMC's first inversion looks to hit really hard. Then there's the quarry wall. It might not be a good idea to ride this at the beginning of the day and with an empty train because the section doesn't look too powerful with an empty train that hasn't warmed up yet. If you can get it in the afternoon and with the full train, this section looks to hold so much more power and ultimately makes the whole experience better. At the 11th spot is Lightning Rod at Dollywood. This ride really has been losing a lot of its praise over the last couple of years, mainly coming from the addition of steel track, a neutered launch, and ultimately the replacement of the launch with a chain lift. Even with the new chain lift, the train still looks to be traveling at the same speed going into the dolly with the chain lift as much as the launch it replaced. So there's not much of a difference there. With this new chain lift, this ride seems to be running a little slower than it should be. It's probably just because it's behaving like a brand new roller coaster. Those wave turns in the first half don't look to provide the insane sideways airtime I've heard about, but that quad down still looks to give the airtime everyone raves about. With that, I have a feeling that when it warms up for the season and beyond, the wave turns and even the quad down will be much more powerful than they are right now. It's the one thing this ride needs: power. Kicking off the top 10 is Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. The best way to describe this ride is that it's trying to be an overachiever, but that's a good thing in this case. Not many coasters of this size would add a third lap, but this ride does, and it works. I can see some power in the second half. You might have to wait for this ride to get warmed up, like Iron Rattler, but it's worth it for the power. No matter how fast the final lap is running, the first two look to hold a lot of power no matter what time of day it is. This ride doesn't seem to bring in too many positives outside of that overbank, but it's not like it's the end of the world. The airtime and hang time moments are what's doing it. This ride may be short in height, but it packs in so many strong looking airtime moments wherever they can fit. And then the hang time moments in the inversions flow so well and complement the rest of the ride so well while being some of the best hang time moments out there by taking these inversions slowly. Overall, this is just a fun ride that may need to warm up to be at its best. Entering the single digits at the 9th spot is Wildfire at Kolmarden. How the hell did a zoo in Sweden get one of the best wooden coasters of all time? Whatever the reason is, it's fine by me. This ride looks to give some of the best hang time moments out there while offering fast-paced switchback turns and a few great airtime moments. Some say this ride dies down in the second half, but from what I can see, it's really only a couple airtime moments that look less forceful. The slowness can even cause an advantage with the inversions by giving great hang time. Also, I wouldn't get worked up over a couple slow airtime hills, as long as they give floater airtime. It's still airtime. Not every hill has to be ejector. There's plenty of that in the first half. Before that amazing first drop, you get a nice scenic turnaround showing the amazing Swedish landscape. Then you hit the first drop, which looks to give the best airtime on the ride, even in the front. After the hang time filled stall, that wave turn looks to just whip you sideways and keep you ejected for a second and then whip you back to the left. After that, you get sent into a series of bank turns and bunny hops plus 2 more hang time filled inversions. This whole ride just uses speed or lack thereof to its advantage. Taking 8th place is Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. This ride really throws airtime at you at every spot possible. It's just airtime hill after airtime hill with an occasional inversion thrown in. However, with the power these airtime hills look to provide, that wouldn't matter to me because who doesn't love airtime? Even as the ride starts to slow down, the airtime hills shrink with it, so the airtime will be just as strong, but in shorter doses. The slower speed also works to the advantage of the inversions. You look to have a little bit of speed going into the first inversion, but you'll still get hang time as you flipped upside down. The cutback looks to be taken with a lot of speed, but by the time you rise up into it, I'm sure the lap bar is the only thing keeping you in your seat. With the final inversion at the end of the ride, you've lost so much speed that hang time just looks guaranteed. This is also a ride that takes advantage of its speed or lack thereof. In the 7th spot is Airy Force 1 at Fun Spot Atlanta. This ride feels like a mashup of elements RMC is known for with a couple new surprises. RMC has done dive loops before, but that twist right before diving to the left is really unique even for RMC. After that, you hit some more classic RMC elements like the stall and the outer bank, both of which look to be some of the best of those kinds of elements. With the double up, you look to get several seconds of straight ejector airtime, which leads directly into what is definitely the best inversion on this ride with the arcade roll. This takes a standard RMC Heartline roll and turns it into Whip Central. After that, there's this demonic low to the ground outer bank that looks to give some of the strongest airtime on the ride combined with insane doses of laterals. Then you're in this sustained helix that looks to pull decent positives and goes right back into another Whip Central Heartline roll. And finally, that finale looks to test the limits of how well the restraints can keep you in by giving what looks to be the strongest airtime on any RMC. It's just a shame this ride didn't add a 6th train, or maybe that would have resulted in this section of track being torn up, but it would make everything else feel stronger. At 6th place is Untamed at Wallaby Holland. This ride is so full of different and wacky elements, it's hard to keep track of. You have that double inverting stall, which looks to give nice whip into sideways airtime and then more whip as it levels out. There's also what I call a double up down. This element is a double up that immediately turns into a double down. This whole ride has been called Mini Steel Vengeance, but I think that's an understatement. There's so many airtime moments on this ride, but they all do something a little different, and that makes this ride not come off as repetitive as Steel Vengeance, even though they're both airtime-centric rides. This ride does so much extra with its airtime moments. It'll have a couple banked hills, a couple trick track hills, and even a dip down from the final inversion only to a step up into the brake run. This ride tried to be extra, and I think it worked beautifully. Taking the 5th spot is Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park. This ride really is a full package. It has a fantastic looking first drop that leads into a well implemented inversion that was somehow the first drop on Wildcat. I heard they added a custom pre-lift to accommodate for this, but I'm glad they did, because they didn't need to, but they did. Every element on this ride feels like they could have been basic RMC elements, like the 0G rolls being camelbacks, but they had to find some way to make it more twisted. And I don't think it didn't work because those extra forces look fantastic. It's great how much RMC has improved on converting GCIs. Because this came from a GCI, it also looks to have a really good flow of elements. Once you think you're done with one element, you're already going through another. This ride tries to bring in the extra, and I think it succeeds in the best way possible. Before I get to the top 4, I will state that the placement of them is quite interchangeable, and I could see this moving around day to day, but I had to stick with this placement for this video. In 4th place is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. This ride really does nothing wrong. Some people claim this ride is repetitive, and yeah, I can see that, but is it really a problem if it comes in the form of strong airtime moments? Besides, the first half is all unique elements from each other that complement each other to form a perfect first half. Each element works off the last one to just make the ride more exciting as it continues. That massive outer bank is much more hyped because you've just finished an already amazing airtime moment in the top hat. This ride uses up all its unique elements in the first half, so after the mid-course, this ride pulls a Twisted Timbers and just throws constant airtime moments at you with an occasional inversion thrown in. Not only that, but the second half also takes place inside the ride structure, which looks to provide a constant feeling like you're going to hit your head or hands on it. It's probably for the best that you keep your hands down in this section. It doesn't seem to help that with the bunny hops in this section look to rival Magnum's finale. This ride may be repetitive, but with airtime that good and whippy elements, that's not much of a problem for me. Taking the third spot is Hakugei at Nagashima Spa Land. This ride definitely has one of the more unique layouts for an RMC. I just love how the first few elements on this ride are taken so high off the ground, but still scaled enough to give crazy airtime by the looks of it. Of course, getting into it requires a double up, and getting out requires a double down. Later, there's this helix that basically has 2 back-to-back wave turns and one after that has back-to-back bank turns. That's kind of where the unique elements end, but thankfully it's enough to make this whole ride feel unique. Other than that, you really have the basic RMC elements, but they look to be done in the best way possible. For some reason, the 0G roll looks to give a quick pop of airtime going into it and getting out of it. Each straight airtime moment looks to pull some really strong negative Gs. This ride may have predictable elements, but it finds some way to surprise you with them. Number 2 might surprise you, but it's Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. Yeah, I said it. Don't get me wrong, this is still an excellent looking ride with some of the best elements RMC has to offer. Even though this ride's in second place, I still think the death roll is the best inversion on any RMC. In the same case of Wildcat's Revenge, they really have gotten better at converting GCIs, especially with this ride being twice as tall as the former Gwazi and having almost no similarity to its layout. You will basically find the best airtime moments on any RMC besides Steel Vengeance on this ride, and they come in all kinds of forms. There's plenty of outside airtime going over that outer bank and sideways airtime on that killer wave turn. There's even looking to be some crazy airtime coming out of that overbank. To complement this ride's great airtime, this ride also looks to have loads of other forces as well. Before getting whipped out of that overbank, you look to get crazy positive Gs going through it. The same can really be applied before the outer bank and death roll. Of course, you can't forget about the crazy whip going through the death roll. It looks to just keep you pinned to the side of your seat while gaining speed while going upside down. It's no wonder why this is considered the best inversion on an RMC. This ride goes great lengths to give crazy forces all over the place, and it really does work spectacularly. Taking first place for this video is Zadra at Energylandia. For me, it's all about one thing: pacing. With the best pacing on any RMC, it was sure to rank pretty highly for me. As a side dish, this ride also throws in the most whippy low-to-the-ground elements. Put these together and you get what I think is the best RMC. Some criticize this ride for not having the most airtime or having floater airtime, and yeah, I'd say this ride isn't airtime focused, but it's trying to be fast-paced with incredibly whippy elements, and I'd say it succeeds at that easily. About the floater airtime, it really doesn't matter too much to me about how strong the airtime is. It's still airtime. As long as I'm out of my seat in a moment that's supposed to give airtime, it's good enough for me. Besides the airtime, this ride looks to be really strong in the other forces such as laterals, positives, and hang time. The inversions are really good examples of this. You get great positives rising into them and then crazy whip while inverting. In the case of the stall, you get 2 great moments of whip separated by an amazing looking sensation of hang time. These forces can also come separately. Going through the first turnaround looks to give some of the greatest sustained positives on an RMC. And then there's the insane laterals going through the switchback turns that are really low to the ground. There's also this wave turn that looks to give 2 quick but really strong moments of laterals going into and out of it. This is why I consider Zadra to be the best RMC. That will just about do it for this video. You probably shouldn't get pissed about anything I said in this video because I haven't ridden any of these rides. I know it's a little controversial for me to do so, but I thought it'd be pretty fun. Anyways, it's time for me to wrap this video up. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.